4 p.m. We'll now resume with the Office for Women. Senator Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, Minister and folks from Office of Women. Thank you for coming today. I've got quite a few questions here about the issue of the 1800 Respect contract, so I hope that you've got the documents to hand. Is the Office for Women aware of the issues that have been reported in relation to that 1800 Respect number? It was a 7:30 report a little while back.
Yes, Senator. While we're not actively involved, we are regularly briefed by DSS on the matter.
So are you aware that the Rape and DV Services Australia, or RVDSA, which employs 110 staff and has decades-long history of providing women-led specialist services, is at risk of shutting down because of a tender process that's being overseen by the Social Services Minister?
I'm aware that is what has been reported, Senator, yes.
Okay. Have you met with either MHS or the Minister about this?
No, we haven't.
Did the Minister or DSS ask for your advice on this issue?
No, it's on our advice to give. The relevant department is DSS and the relevant Minister is Minister Porter.
Yes.
So
has Minister Porter or DSS asked the Office of Women for advice about this issue?
No.
No, but they have been providing us briefings, Senator.
Yes.
Yeah.
They've been briefing you, but have they asked you for advice?
No.
Right. Do you see it as your role to advocate within government to stop a highly regarded service like this from being shut down?
Look, our role is to ensure that the services exist. It's not to advocate for a particular provider, Senator.
Okay. So what options are available to you to ensure that that service is going to remain being delivered, ideally by the best placed folk to deliver it?
Look, I think that you should direct your specific questions to DSS. Our understanding is that there's a tender process underway and that tender process will result in a service being provided. We haven't been given any information which would suggest that that's not going to be the case.
Okay, so you don't involve yourself at the level of detail about what's the most appropriate service body to be delivering those services?
No, we're not involved in the evaluation. That role is for DSS.
Okay.
However, Senator, I would add if Office Women formed a view that the tender process was in any way unsound or wasn't merit-based or open or professionally run, then certainly I think we would have a responsibility incumbent upon us to advise at least the Minister for Women about that, who would then take that up.
Okay, thank you. Just regarding that tender process, it seems to be a bit of lack of clarity. I'm hoping you can disabuse me of set the record straight. Who has asked for the review of the tender? Is it the Minister, is it the Department, or is it MHS? Does anybody know?
Review of the tender?
Yeah, the fact that it's they're even undertaking this exercise at all.
So the current funding was coming to an end, and this is a normal government process to put new funding into place.
Well, the funding doesn't end for another 2 years, so I don't understand.
The now, is it the funding for Medibank Health Services?
Yeah,
or for RD?
It's the contract that MHS then basically subcontracts down, and they do that at the moment to RVDSA, if I'm getting that acronym correct. And I understand that MHS is currently reviewing that subcontract.
So it's not a government
It's not the
tender.
head contract, which is still on foot for another 2 years. And so I'm wondering why MHS are doing that and at whose behest.
I can take it on notice, but my notes, Senator, actually say that the subcontract does expire on the 30th of June 2017. So that's my understanding. But I can check
so
that.
the contract that MHS has with RVDSA expires.
That's my
and
understanding.
hence they're reviewing
Yep.
the process. Okay, and does government have anything to do
No, just to be
with the
clear,
process?
Senator Waters, the Office of Women itself doesn't have any role in the tender. This specific aspect is all run from DSS. So the questions could be put to DSS if you want detailed analysis.
I will do that. I guess I'm just trying to get at as well as the detail, which I'll take up with DSS, what role the Office of Women should play in an example such as this. And forgive me, but I'm always left a little baffled as to what the Office of Women actually does after we have these estimate sessions, and it's no imputing on yourselves. But harkening back to some of the earlier questions, if the input into the budget is limited and the input into important decisions like this is limited, can you please tell me what it is that you do?
I don't think the evidence that was given by the officials was input is limited. Perhaps Ms Hatfield-Dodds can take you through in relation to DSS, the relationship that the Office of Women has with them in relation to 1800 Respect.
Okay, sure.
So essentially, we've got a close working relationship with the Department of Social Services, and on 1800 Respect and other more operational outworkings of the government's Women's Safety Program, the Department of Social Services is very much running the tender, but we've got an overarching coordination and I suppose a coordination role, and also a role in ensuring that the government's commitments to women around women's safety, women's participation and women's economic empowerment are all lived out. So our role in 1800 Respect is not so much to have a view about particularly that subcontract between Medibank Health and any other third party, but to ensure that from a central perspective in the Australian government that the line is working and is in fact providing women with the services they need. So we do know that the new triage model that came in August 2016 last year, that was brought in to reduce very high wait times and high call abandonment rates, and that's been a really successful model. So we've been looking at the outcome of the 1800 number in terms of the services that women can access, and really that's around wait times and call abandonment rates. What DSS were particularly keen to ensure happened is that when women ring 1800 Respect, they're not kept waiting on the line and they don't give up and hang up and move on.
So I'm glad you raised that, because you've jogged my memory. My understanding is that, yes, the answer rates have gone up, but that the quality of the service that people are receiving when they call the number has dramatically dropped because it's untrained people being used, there's far less quality assurance and supervision. So it's all very well to answer the phone, but the first response is critical, and if women aren't getting a supported and an expertly trained response, then it could have drastic consequences. And I'm pleased to hear that you raised that, because I think that's something the Office of Women should concern itself with, and hence my interest in this subcontract, because RVDSA are in fact experts. They've got a long history, they've been around for donkey's years, they know what they're doing. So again, I'm hoping to get some more information about how Office of Women will involve itself in this process to ensure that, as you say, those measures can be best met.
So I guess I would say, Senator Waters, this actual activity is held by the Social Services portfolio. So Minister Porter and the Department of Social Services have got primary responsibility for it. But our understanding is that the triage model has provided specialist trauma counsellors to people that need specialist trauma counselling. I just don't have the detail with me because this is a social services activity. I guess I would assume that if people are reporting that they would prefer longer engagement on the phone, it may be that they've been triaged into a space that they don't think. So I would imagine that most people ringing 1800 Respect would prefer to speak to a trauma counsellor. There's a clinical model around that now that where people are directed to a particular level of service. And that was to try to decrease the wait times and to actually increase the quality of the interaction. But the Department of Social Services has got all that information to hand.
Can I perhaps just give you some additional information just in relation to the first response triage model? As you know, it was introduced 16th of August 2016, and the reason it was introduced was to respond to what had been considered unacceptable wait times and a high abandonment of calls. Just in terms of the statistics to date, from the 16th of August 2016 to March the 31st this year, 43,717 calls were received and 90% were answered, and approximately 73% of calls were answered within 20 seconds. Just to give you a comparison with what had occurred previously and the reason that the triage model was moved to, in the 2015-16 financial year, 63,273 calls were received, but only 33% were answered. And in terms of the introduction of the triage model, the rationale behind it was very much that trauma specialist counsellors can focus on assisting callers that need the specialist trauma support, rather than assisting callers whose needs can be met by qualified professional first response counsellors. And so when you look at how the model has now evolved, it's now more responsive, and certainly that is, when you look at the statistics, it certainly is more responsive. And it's a more supportive service, providing a more targeted service depending on what you need.
Who's making the decisions about whether further trauma counselling is required, though? It's if the first respondent, if the people who are answering the calls in first instance are not trauma specialists, how are they to know that they need to refer them to trauma specialists? And I guess my broader point is no one objects to the phone calls being answered. That's, of course, the whole purpose of the service. But my objection or my question is why was it deemed that this be subcontracted out to a private provider who is now on subcontracting, and question marks over whether they'll continue to subcontract out to the appropriate personnel? Why wasn't more funding provided so that the calls could be answered by the appropriate personnel? You know, it's not a zero-sum game here.
Ultimately, obviously, those decisions are made by DSS, but certainly in relation to the funding, and I can try and get it for you whilst we're here, we have continued to make additional investment in 1800 Respect, as you know, and I believe that we've spoken about this at previous estimates. But in terms of the ultimate decisions in terms of the subcontract, etc., they are more, you'd need to put them to DSS.
Okay, so in relation to the money that was sought by RDVSA so that they could appoint additional counsellors and answer every call, that application was not successful, and the money instead went to MHS. In fact, more money went to MHS than RVDSA even asked for in the first place. So the government picked the more expensive and private option. Who made that decision?
You'd have to, that's for DSS.
DSS, yeah. Okay. And as the Minister for Women, do you have any involvement in those sorts of decisions?
We are in constant discussions with DSS in terms of 1800 Respect. So our role is to ensure that the service is provided, that there is adequate funding for the service. Decisions in relation to ultimately the contract, though, are made by DSS, but we provide feedback to them in terms of the feedback that we receive, so they know the types of stakeholders that are responding to us. But ultimately the decision is made by Minister Porter.
So have you made representations to Minister Porter or had discussions with him about
We've
this?
had discussions, yes.
And have you advocated for the retention of RVDSA to keep that subcontract?
The discussions we have are obviously confidential, but certainly even following the last estimates, and you recall that Senator Moore, actually it may have been yourself.
I was having a baby, the last one. I missed the last
Oh,
one.
Combination of myself and Janet Rice.
At a previous estimate. And certainly we obviously raised all of these issues with Minister Porter and got an extensive briefing on them. It's ultimately what our role is, though, is to ensure that the money is there, the service is being provided, and it is being provided to support women suffering from domestic violence.
Sure. It needs to be a quality service, though. So
Absolutely.
I would hope that as Minister for Women, you are
Hence
taking
why,
him to task on this.
Oh, but also it's not so much taking him to task or taking the DSS to task. It's also ensuring that in terms of, for example, call waiting times, they were unacceptable.
Yes,
they were
but the solution is give them some more funding so they can do the job. You don't have
but as I
to
said,
contract it out to a private provider.
And I haven't got it with me, and I'm trying to get it for you now. We have provided additional funding, in particular in relation to the second action plan. Under the National Action Plan, specific funding, additional funding was provided for 1800 Respect. I don't
To
know if we have-
MHS though, or to,
Oh, well, we're trying to get that for you now.
provided to whom, the extra funding?
1800 Respect.
Who then gave it to MHS?
I will need to find that out. That's what I'm trying to get for you
Okay.
now.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Can I move just very quickly in the time that I've got left to just some general budget questions? The gender lens that was released last night by the National Foundation for Australian Women and for which Senator Moore earlier referred to, it really is quite a damning assessment of the budget, and in my view it's a very